This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Rob Douglas on the Talent Talks podcast. Rob has 30 years of procurement experience, starting his procurement career at a Ford Motor Company before moving to Capgemini, then on to Barclays before securing his first CPO role at Currys in 2007. Rob led significant changes within the team, including implementing a new robust category strategy, governance, and achieved significant influence at board level, before then becoming head of UK procurement at National Grid. Rob recently finished 8 years as CPO at Direct Line Group, overseeing 1.45 billion of third-party spend, leading a huge supply chain management program of work, as well as driving the ESG agenda and implementing a new risk management process across the group. So, kicking things off, how did you start in procurement? How did your career start?
That's a good question. I didn't come out of university wanting to go into procurement. I have to say, to be honest, I'm not sure I really knew what it was. I wanted to join the army, actually, and I had a short career in the army. I wasn't particularly great at it, to be honest, whatever that is. But it taught me a lot, actually, about leadership. So that was one of the key things I kind of picked up, which I really, really enjoyed, the leadership aspects of the army. And the army is brilliant at that. So that was one of the key things. Then after that, I thought, well, like most graduates, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So I'll go and join an accountancy firm. Why not? So I joined KPMG.
Okay.
And did a year doing, counting widgets in warehouses, studying for ACA. And what that taught me was I really enjoyed business, but I wanted to be part of the decision, not actually looking at what other people had done. Right. And I kind of put the two things together and thought, I like leadership, but I also like analysis. I like being part of business. And that kind of then drew me into thinking about purchasing, as it was called in those days, right? It wasn't called procurement; it was called purchasing, right?
Yeah.
And so I looked at a few grad schemes and then went through and got through into the Ford scheme, which was great, So
a very competitive scheme, I imagine.
It was, and it was a big scheme in those days. So I think from my intake, I think we had like maybe 30 people, in a year, and they had multiple years of it. So it really was.
Was that in Basildon, in Essex? Where was the site?
It was Bas Vegas. We were based, and but we were buying across Europe right from the get-go. So that was one of the brilliant things. You were buying for plants in Germany, Spain, Belgium, the UK, with a supply base right across the UK and also the US. Well, as I say the UK, I mean Europe, to be honest. Not many of our suppliers were actually UK-based, to be honest. So Ford was very European-based, and that was just a great background, really.
Yeah. I tend to find with people, a lot of people have come on the podcast before, they've come off like BA or Ford grad schemes where it's very much, as you said, purchasing, but you've got to be so meticulous with the process. And did you find that really help with your career then?
Oh, completely. The lessons I learned there, to be honest, were amazing. There were a few things that they did which were really, really interesting. So this is, you have to cast your mind back here. This is the late 90s, right? So this really does age me here. So
you quote the years, not me.
Exactly. So it's late 90s, and in those days, it was just the start of category strategy. So we literally had A.T. Carney come in. These guys flew over from the US, and I remember some guy had like a sort of Super Bowl ring on or something. I was like, what is this? And they were talking to us about category strategy and how to do it, and the classic A.T. Carney kind of method. And so that was an incredible learning opportunity. But Ford also at that time, the structure of their courses in the scheme, you could just really sup all this up and then apply it. So, we learned how to do Lean Six Sigma. We learned how to do VAVE. We learned how to do what they called a Global 8D, which is, root cause analysis and piece. Just incredible. The structure was amazing. And the beauty was, because it's manufacturing, you could actually see the impact of it. Whereas in services, it's so much harder, right? That's what I learned. Those early years in manufacturing, I wouldn't have changed that for the world. It was great.
Yeah, great training ground for you before going into the wider career.
The Talent Talks podcast is delighted to be sponsored by Omnia. Omnia is an AI-native intake and orchestration platform that lets procurement teams focus on strategy and not systems. It creates a single front door for requests, orchestrates integrated processes across sourcing, approvals, and third-party risk management, is a source of truth for supplier data, and connects every corner of the procurement tech stack with no-code, drag-and-drop workflows. Omnia is trusted with procurement teams such as Spotify, MongoDB, and Synthesia to deliver an amazing experience, time and cost savings and efficiency. Now let's get back to today's episode of the Talent Talks podcast.
So in terms of your philosophy then on building kind of lasting relationships with your suppliers, how does that differ with people, and how do you go about that, dealing with the supplier here, dealing with the people? How have you
I mean so I'm very I've always wanted, thought about things in terms of a sort of methodology, right? So it's very much, when I'm thinking about suppliers, I'm definitely putting them on a Kraujic matrix. I'm thinking, is this a strategic relationship? Are we leverage? What are we? Is this a bottleneck supplier, or is it transactional? And then thinking about how they view me, definitely. So I always do think about that, and you just have to put that personal relationship aside. And I guess the reason that I think about it that way, and this is very much taught to me from the early years at Ford, we would go in and work with suppliers, and we'd have some suppliers who were very sophisticated and looked like they were, really well-run suppliers. And you would just have some kind of shift in the technology, and that supplier, whilst they were working hard and were strategic to us, they just got left behind by a change in the technology. And so you'd need to identify and work with a new supply base. So I think you can develop strategic relationships with suppliers, but you've always got to go back to the basics, understand their core capability, understand how important they are to you. And then have an appropriate relationship around that. The people side of it, what I would also say is it's a small industry, right? So, you've got to treat people well. I think you do need to be straightforward and honest with them, but you can still be fact-driven and not be horrible, right? You can be fact-driven and help try to understand what's going on, and but still have that personal touch with people. And I think that's that is really important, because I say, when I look back on it, the people that I started with at Ford, many of those went on into the wider procurement and supply chain area, and also a lot of the suppliers I worked with, have always been they turn up. You work with them at one company, and then 3 companies later they are right. So you have to think about how you treat people and be fair and honest and open with them. But that doesn't mean that you'd have to tell them everything. Also, I say being fair and honest does not mean giving away the power in a situation. Knowledge is important.
And did you find? No, totally agree. But was that something you sort of learn, or was that sort of something innate in you, that sort of how you approached people? Because as you say, you're commercial. You're there to be commercial. You're there to drive value. You're there to drive. Savings and other things in procurement. Is that something you sort of learned and adapted as you went through? Did you learn from others? How did you sort of evolve your leadership style?
That's a good question. I think a little bit of it is innate, right? So I come a little bit from a skeptical kind of thought mindset. I'm analytical. I am I'm that skeptic sitting at the back of the room going, really? Is that right? Can you show me? Prove it to me. And they, so I think that's innate in me. But I also think some of the experiences that I had did show me that you've got to be able to manage the perceptions of the suppliers effectively. That's really important if you want to get them to think about you in the right way, and equally, to get to the best you can in that situation. So managing the suppliers' perceptions, which and part of that is around being clear on what facts they have, what facts they don't have sometimes actually as well.
And you've got we were talking off air before around that real diversity of industry sectors you've worked in. You've worked in retail, you've worked in energy, you've worked in obviously in financial services. You just recently left Direct Line after 8 years. How have you? Presumably, it's been very contrasting between the different sectors. And how were you able to adapt? Because the environment at Currys, I imagine, was very different to Direct Line, for example. So how have you been able to adapt in your career?
No, very much so. And I think I've learned something from every industry I've worked in, right? So I've found them all really interesting. The basic technique in terms of category strategy and the application of category strategy into what you do, which is one of the things that I learned from A.T. Kearney early doors. Hasn't changed. It applies to every industry. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, it applies to every industry. I don't think it makes any difference which industry you're working in. But you've obviously got to understand how to apply it in the space you're in, right? And if you're in utilities, some of the investments you're making there, things you buy, those things can last 50, 60, 70 years or longer. They're really long-term total cost of ownership decisions, right? Whereas, if you think about that in a retail space, it's a lot faster paced, right? So it's all about Monday morning, how do we trade at the weekend? You couldn't get a bigger contrast, if you like.
Yeah.
And the whole piece around, risk management in financial services and the way that they handle that is completely different to, being in a retail environment, I think. So I've learned something from every industry. I found it fascinating. But the basic techniques that you take with you, how to optimize, a demand, spec and supply chain are the same. So
were they deliberate move? Did you deliberately sort of go outside your comfort zone to go from different sectors? Because often you find that certain procurement leaders will maybe gravitate to certain industries that they feel comfortable in and remain within that. You've not done that.
No.
Was that deliberate?
So I always wanted to work for someone who I think had a good brand in the marketplace. So I think that was important to me. And I think I did, I was quite careful in my early career in particular to think, if I move to this company, what am I going to get from this? What's the experience that I'm going to get from it? So I wasn't really driven so much by money, in terms of, is this going to, do they happen to pay better, right? That's great. But it wasn't the prime motivator. The prime motivator was really, is this going to be great experience on my CV? Am I going to look at this and go, this has really built me up here? And was very careful to do that in the early years. And also to make sure I tried to get a good dose of experience in each area. So I really got to know that industry.
Yeah. And in terms of procurement in your career, your words, not mine, been a long time, and you've obviously seen lots of changes.
Yeah.
How have you seen the procurement profession sort of evolve? We look at it today in 2025 versus in the late 90s. Lots has changed, obviously, but how have you seen that evolve?
Yeah. Well, it was very purchasing driven in those days, and I think that's right. So it was savings driven predominantly. It definitely then evolved into people thinking about total cost of ownership, and how to really optimize the big levers, as I said, like demand, specification, as well as thinking about what we used to call the tier 1, 2, 3 of the supply chains. But what you've seen added is definitely a more end-to-end view on it, right?
Yeah.
So the supply chain management post-contract has become crucial. And in reality now, you can't divorce the two. They are so intertwined. The way you onboard and offboard a supplier, the way you manage operational resilience and threats around cyber security and things like that, and manage information security. I mean, I have to say, I don't think they were big considerations in the early and late 90s. They really weren't. You were predominantly interested in core capability of the suppliers, and were they set up to be permanently competitive for you. Now you've got to think about all these other aspects as well.
And do you think that then makes a difference on when you're hiring for talent, and maybe in your later years at Direct Line versus perhaps in your earlier career at Ford and onwards? Did it change kind of what you were looking for in an individual? Was there a difference there, or have you remained consistent with the kind of core characteristics?
Yeah, again, very interesting. So I've always looked for someone who I would say has the buyer's instinct.
Okay.
So that's never gone away.
Talk me through that a bit more.
Buyer's instinct is that you can't teach that. That's one of the things I would say. You either have it or you don't. That's my experience of it. And it's those folks who will just have that curiosity to, will just try to take that lead, and then suddenly we'll see the opportunity in something. And obviously, if you combine buyer's instinct with great technique, what you find is they can be a very powerful person in terms of strategic sourcing, right? But you can give someone great technique, and if they haven't got the buyer's instinct, they'll miss the opportunity for whatever reason. So you're always looking for a little bit of that, for sure.
How do you test that? Just in terms of with my recruitment hat on, because I really agree with you. But that instinct, it's hard, isn't it? It's an innate thing, and as you say, for you as a hiring manager and as a procurement leader, it's personal, and you'll think, do they have it or not? So how do you?
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it, I have to say. I mean, I think doing maybe a bit boringly, a little case study does help, right? Because you've got to try to see a little insight into their thinking. Where do they think the opportunity? Where's the angle? How are they going to attack this situation? How are they going to get into it and find something for you from it? That's probably the way. There is a little bit of just that piece that says, if you give them a push, they're going to push you back. They're not going to roll over on it, right? There's just that little bit of and it's not about that's just that small piece of binding. It's only one piece, so I wouldn't over egg it. I would say, Because as I say, I think you've got to be a rounded individual now as well. So you can't, if you, and I think that is the difference. In those days, maybe people who were strong on bias instinct, but not so strong on the wider pieces, the technique, the leadership skills, the stakeholder management skills, could get further than they could now. Now, you need to have all of those things. You can't be just focused on one area.
Yeah, totally agree. With procurement as it's evolved, though, I mean, there's so many aspects to a procurement position. You referenced there the contract management, as you say, post-contract, and the supply chain curve, supplier risk management, the governance, the doing the deals, the category execution, which we've spoken about. There's a lot. ESG, AI, embracing tech, digital, working with the CIO and the CTO, and then there's a lot for procurement. Do you find that has maybe made the procurement profession, has it diluted it? Has it made it larger? Is it harder to attract talent? I'd love to sort of see because there's so many things that have bolted on from those early days in your career when you were a purchasing manager to today. How do you navigate that as a business leader and a procurement leader?
I mean, so people fundamentally are looking for really strong advice from you. So it's that piece around. So I think when you're in procurement, you aren't the decision maker ultimately. You aren't. You are the trusted advisor giving great advice to someone. So you've got to work out how to give that great advice. And you can't do that if you don't understand the way commercially the situation is going to unfold. If you're not clear about where the big risks are and how they can be handled, if you're not clear about how you get the best from the supplier or the relationships or persuade the stakeholders. So absolutely, you've got all of these other things crowding in now. It's not just about the commercials. You've got to be able to do these other things as well. Maybe it dilutes it a bit. Maybe, I don't know. I certainly think you've got more to think about than you used to. That's for sure. And I definitely learned from consulting. Which I did for a couple of years. The piece around treating the clients and how to become a trusted advisor, super important, right? I think as well. And that is different from being right. That's what I would say. Yes, you can in your own head say, I know what the answer is to this situation, but that's not the way to explain it to someone. You've got to go through the options, the rationale, get their input, understand where they're coming from, and then give them good advice. Yeah.
And take them on I know it's the cliche line, take them on the journey with you, but completely. That's very much what it's about.
Completely, yeah. And if you turn up with the right answer, and it might well be the right answer, by the way, don't get me wrong. I think I usually have in my mind's eye what I think is the right outcome here. But going through that journey to get the input from the key decision makers in there, and make sure that they are bought into what you're doing is super important, because otherwise it just unwinds. You hit the first bump and everything falls apart, right? So you've got to take people with you.
In terms of where you see procurement now, what do you think are the biggest challenges that the profession faces at the moment?
So the biggest challenge is undoubtedly balancing risk with commerciality, right? Because those two things, one can, if you're not careful, can cancel out the other. And at the end of the day, if you manage your risk brilliantly, that's great. And certainly if things go wrong and you haven't managed your risk, you've got a massive problem. But equally, if you stop being commercial, in the end, your business dies, right? At the end of the day, you've got to focus on making sure that you're helping your company deliver long-term profitability. So it doesn't mean short-term deals. It doesn't mean not thinking about risk factors or core capability or how you'd handle a cyber attack from your supplier. All those things are important, but you also have to bring that commercial lens to it. And sometimes that gets lost. That's what I'd say. I've certainly worked with a few people in at the financial services realm where they're so focused on risk, they can't actually see the commerciality of the situation either. You've got to do both. It's not one or the other.
It's a really hard balance, isn't it? Because
completely.
You need to identify the risk, but to your point, you need to get the right sort of commercial agreement in place that's going to benefit both parties.
And it's also practicalities, right? So if you look at it, cybersecurity was not something you worried about 20 years ago. You just didn't. Whereas in the last few years, when I look at the hit rate of cyber attacks getting through on your kind of top 100, 120 suppliers, the hit rate for people is high. I mean, just look at, obviously it's all over the news for various
M&S
people.
and other businesses.
Coming in through their supply chain, by the way, in terms of some of the vulnerabilities. And it's just all over. So if you're managing a big supply chain, you are going to have to live with the fact that your suppliers are going to have a cyber incident. So not having the right operational resilience, not really getting into the detail about how they're encrypting at rest, all those maybe technical details, which haven't got a lot to do with commerciality, but got everything to do with when it goes wrong, what happens. You can't ignore that stuff. You've got to be in there. But you could have the most secure supply base in the world, and if they're not delivering you permanent competitive advantage, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah. It's a really hard, and it probably goes back to the commercial instinct you spoke about earlier on. People need to understand the risk on both, because you say you can't just stay in one camp.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So reflecting on your career, which isn't overplay, obviously, but just in terms of to present day, so like a final thing. But reflecting on your career today, what do you think your biggest learn's been in your kind of career? Has there been a moment you've maybe got something wrong, you thought, maybe, or just reflecting back, has there been a moment, a standout moment for you that you're happy to share that you think that was a good learn for me?
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely think I went from wanting to win everything to actually realizing that it's not about winning the argument. It's not about that. Okay. It is about actually being able to look back and go, as a team, did we do the right thing overall? And I think part of that is it's a reflection as you get a little bit more mature, and also as you start leading teams, to be honest. Which is, it becomes less about your personal decision making, and it becomes more about the people that you're working with and the quality of their decision making that starts to make the difference for you. Because you're not going to be in the muck and bullets anymore if you're leading a team of 70, 80 people, right? You're just not in that. What you need is your team to be taking great decisions on your behalf and giving great advice. So that piece around how do you then help develop your team, that's the biggest learning that you get. Going from being a buyer at the start to then leading
just
a team.
On you. You're
absolutely. It's all about your performance. It's then you start thinking about, now hang on, how do I get my team to perform in the best way?
Is that hard sometimes though? Because as you've managed massive teams, is that quite hard though, that from a controlling perspective, that's the right word, and an ownership perspective, as you say, it's very much the deliveries, a lot of it's coming down to them, right? And ultimately the buck lies with you as the CPO.
No, that's right.
Is that quite a challenge?
It's definitely a challenge, and I'm sure people who've worked for me will say, "I wish you hadn't had so many opinions and shut up and let me get on with it and trust me more." I'm sure
you want them to deliver, don't you? But you don't. You want to empower, which of course you would have done. But it's a hard.
No, it is a hard thing, because for me, I like to test the arguments. So and certainly one of the things that I did definitely try to do with my teams was, when they thought that they had a clear view about what should be done, I wanted them to come in and test the argument on me, right? And I would, be fairly combative with them around it. Yeah. But with a view that then when they actually took the argument in, it would withstand contact. Yeah. It wasn't going to be something that suddenly, a stakeholder or the supplier picked it apart and you fell apart in the moment. It was a robust decision and would withstand contact, So
and I imagine from your early days at Ford you probably learnt that naturally things will be scrutinized because of the focus and how big the business is.
Definitely. And they were big decisions. That's the thing, that was the beauty of going in there, to be honest, because the decisions we were taking were really big decisions. And the other thing is as a young grad wet behind the ears, you were interfacing with MDs and CEOs of quite large companies very quickly. And it forced you to grow up really quickly, because what you couldn't do is turn up unprepared, and make a kind of a half-assed argument. Frankly, you were going to get pulled apart by people who are very serious about their industry and about their companies. And so you had to go in really well prepared and understand the core elements, the demand drivers, the spec, and how to optimize that, and really, really understand the supply chain and core capabilities in the supply chain. If you did that, then you get somewhere. But if you turned up half prepped, you're going to have a real problem.
Preparation to ensure you can
definitely. And I would live by that to today. I feel most uncomfortable. It's like a recurring nightmare I have. I turn up for an A level and I haven't I haven't studied for it.
I've had
I
that
still
dream.
get that. It's
Yeah,
a classic
yeah,
dream for
yeah,
the things, and
yeah.
it's it's horrendous. And then you wake up, and you go, yeah, okay, that was 40 years ago, almost now.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not there now. I'm not there now.
Yeah.
So, looking at procurement, I mean, we talked around the change, which I definitely agree with you. Where would you say procurement is today in terms of its profession?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a lot that can be done to help it progress and advance? Do you think it's in a really good place? What are your general views and impressions?
My biggest concern is definitely the grad layer, right? So
Okay.
the graduate layer. So when I look at the structure that was around me when I joined Ford, and I think was around lots of people at Mars, British Airways,
Absolutely.
Black & Decker, Rolls-Royce. You could reel off a series of really high quality graduate purchasing or procurement schemes in those days, and they don't exist. They've all gone.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think genuinely there is a problem, which is just the dynamics around the amount of debt that people are getting into at university. So recently. We tried to start a graduate scheme, right? Yeah. And it was very successful. We had lots of people who really wanted to get onto it. It was great. We had a pick of some super people on there.
Was this a direct line, sorry, or was this?
Yeah, it was direct line. Yeah. And the people we got on there were great, really great quality, developed really quickly. We poured a huge amount of effort into them. But the issue was they just, they quickly became marketable and moved on, right? Which I can't blame them for. They obviously have significant student debt, and at the point you get a chance to monetize yourself, why wouldn't you, right? Yeah. But I do think that my reflection for that group is I wish you'd stayed a bit longer and got more depth and experience, and then looked around you, because I think that's so important. But the issue is if you're the employer, you pour a huge amount of effort into these folks, and they really need to stay with you for 3 to 4 years on average. And if they're going at the end of the scheme, because they've got a great job offer, which is paying, can be paying 10, 15, 20,000 pounds more than you're able to do on your pay structure, it just kills the scheme. And that's what's happened to them all. I think they've all gone because of that dynamic. So I don't know what the answer is. I really don't.
It's really hard, isn't it? I looked at it with a few peers of yours about 18 months ago. I looked into trying to almost create a support like a graduate program, but exactly the reasons why you said that CPOs were saying to me, look, Martin, to your point, we can go and invest them and pay 35 grand a year or whatever it may be to get them on the scheme, but then they could leave in 12 months, 18 months, and we train them. We take all the risk. We're taking the cost.
100%.
And then they exit.
Well, also,
as well.
it's like a sponge, right? You put an enormous amount in. Although they're very intelligent, you put an enormous amount in, and you don't get a lot back for the first, 12 months. To be honest, you get something back, but not a lot, right?
Yeah.
12 to 24 months, this starts to become useful. 24 months onwards, very useful, and start to pay you back. Yeah. But unless you're getting past that 2-year mark, it doesn't work. So I think there's I'm not quite sure what the answer is on that one, to be honest. But I do know that if people aren't getting those first starting positions, we're going to create a problem for ourselves later down the line.
I think we're already seeing it now, Rob. I mean, I'm sure you found it as well when you've been hiring. But I think at a more junior level, I think it's really tough because businesses will come to us and say, we want to bring in a buyer. Yeah, they're the hardest roles to fill because talent almost. I was talking to someone the other day about this. They almost jump through the salary grades really quickly. When I first started doing procurement recruitment 17 years, you'd go incremental. I'd leave for $5,000 here. I'd go for a couple of grand there, or maybe I'll go laterally. Now it's literally jumping through 15, 20K pay grades. And buyers are coming off, whether it's a grad program or just an entry level role, they're going into a senior category manager role in 3 or 4 years.
No, quite.
Because some businesses will pay it. So then you've got a bit like the housing market. You pay what the house is, what someone's willing to pay you. And also, you then have this huge gap, and there's almost a bit of a lost generation of buyers. It is a worry. It's a worry for us. If we posted a head of procurement role tomorrow, we'll have no problem getting candidates or a senior category manager role. But it's the buyer roles, which never used to be the case.
No, exactly. And there were ones where you could attract good candidates in, and it's very difficult. I think, and also, say if you give someone great technique, right, they interview well. So unsurprisingly, they're worth a lot, right?
Exactly.
So it's not a double-edged sword because I would want to keep doing it all the time, but in the end, the dynamics just get the better of you, which is you just can't handle it.
You get sort of recruitment fatigue, don't you? Because you keep bringing in these people. And
well, particularly if you're a mid-sized team. I mean, only the very, very largest teams can afford that kind of turnover.
Do you think there's also, and I've commented this very openly about it, do you think there's also more that maybe SIPs and maybe just generally the procurement profession can do to help educate? Because like you said then, and I didn't know what procurement was when I started in recruitment in it. A lot of people don't know what it is. Do you think there's still a bit of a brand identity with procurement?
Oh, definitely. I went to the local sixth form college near me, and they did the careers, right? So they did all these careers, and I was there waving the flag for procurement and supply chain.
Yeah.
And I was saying to them, who doesn't want to be? You could be taking decisions worth millions of pounds very quickly early on in your career. If you go into another business, you might wait years to be able to have that level of influence. And they're all very interested, but to be honest, none of them had a clue before. They literally all were there going, what is this? I don't understand. And it's not surprising because a lot of and this isn't a criticism of teachers.
No, not.
They just because they don't often come from the business world, they don't really understand how all this works, right? So this idea that you're a commercial leader in a company influencing people, significantly more senior than you, either in your company and in the supply base, and how interesting that can be. And the combination of leadership, analytics, and interpersonal skills, which a lot of if you start talking to the I won't say the kids because they're not kids. If you start talking to the younger cohort who are pre-university about that, they absolutely want to know about interpersonal skills. They're really interested in leadership, and my goodness, are they interested in commerciality? So you've got to break it down to those types of skills, and then they start to get more interested.
Well, you sort of list off all the things that procurement does and is involved in. I think that sounds brilliant. It's like, well, this is the profession. This is what you're trying to do. And I always say to people on the pod, the irony of it is, once people get into procurement, the retention's amazing. You've been there for many years doing a really successful career in procurement. Most of the people that I speak to are like that. They don't go into procurement, do it 3 years and go, nah, not for me. They'll stay in it long term. And
the variety. I mean, that's part of the joy of it, right? So, when I think about the various different things that I've bought over the years, it really does vary.
You must have literally bought everything.
Well, it varies. It varies from semiconductors to I think the strangest one was embalming fluid, right? Which is most odd.
Wow.
I work for the cooperative group, and that obviously they do funeral care, right? Really important thing. And they buy a lot of chemicals, for a necessary purpose. So that was definitely an odd one. But most of the things I bought were fundamentally really interesting, right? So, and you get into it. I certainly, again, I would go back and say, really understanding how, manufacturing lines worked, and things like the theory of constraints and how to do value analysis and value engineering early in your career is so important. And those skills don't get taught. So they definitely don't, you're not going to get that at university. And now because there's no grad programs, you're not going to get that wherever. So all of the people typically who've come and worked in my teams recently, I've been talking to them about value engineering, about how to use Lean Six Sigma really effectively, and it's all been new skills, to be honest, in the whole, because that's just not covered. So there is a big hole in there which used to be filled by people who would be working for Rolls or for Ford, because it was part of the process of manufacturing.
So some loads of really good tips there, but I guess if you give one bit of advice to someone that's maybe, I think I particularly want to ask you this question around aspiring CPOs. You talked about people entry level and how they can be successful in their career, but for people listening in that would want the kind of career you've had and going to sort of the senior roles that you've had, what one bit of advice would you give them?
So the first thing I would say is continue to be curious, right? So don't certainly when I got some of the opportunities I got, they came about because I had been hopefully doing a good job in the role I was in, right?
I'm sure you did.
And then people looked at it and said, well, great, this guy feels like he could lead, right? So I think that leadership side of things is really important, combined with the technique and the ability to deliver, the drive to deliver. So those things are really important. And to develop those, you've got to really just keep working on your experiences. So that's what I would say. So, if someone comes out of the box and says, look, I want to be a CPO, I would just say, well, go and get the most interesting experiences you can, which are going to develop your technique, your understanding of leadership, and allow you to practice it and do it a lower level, because you're not going to make the leap suddenly up to CPO and get considered. You're going to need to go through, and keep getting great experiences. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So interesting. That's really interesting, because I see it quite a lot that you get people that go through the category management, go into senior category management, maybe get their first head of role, and then they become almost a bit fixated on the job titles and the seniority. They go and do a procurement director job that they hate in a business they've got no interest in the product and the service. Guess what? They leave in 12, 18 months and they don't become that CPO because they get stuck in that. So what you're saying is actually focus on a business you can get behind and be passionate about. And
I mean, if you enjoy, I've really enjoyed and maybe it's a bit, maybe some people would consider it boring. I used to really, really enjoy going and walking production lines. I really enjoy going and having a look at the way a business process outsourcing supplier operates. How are they recruiting? How are they really actually operating? How does getting into the plumbing, lifting the bonnet, I think is probably the best phrase on it. And
you'll get buy-in from that as well, won't you? Because people will see you doing that, and it's
I just found it interesting.
CPO is there; he's actually walking the line and doing that. You're not just in inverted commas an ivory tower, which some people perceive in
I have to say, my reflection is I probably did more of that than I should have done later on in my career. I always wish that I keep that curiosity and keep going, lifting the bonnet and looking more, because when I was doing that, not only was I getting more insight and finding more things of interest to our business, but I was also enjoying it more. So I think both of the two things came together, right? If I have one reflection is do less internal politics and do more visiting suppliers. It's kind of, that's one thing I would say to myself.
Well, I think you can end up, particularly the level of role you've operated at, you can end up potentially being stuck in the
you're managing the internal stuff. Of course you're managing budgets, you're managing your internal politics, you're trying to to be honest, you're trying to keep your team empowered is what you're trying to do. But the enjoyable stuff is getting out there, getting out to the supply base and having a look at what's really going on under the hood.
Thank you. We're going to finish with a quick fire 5 questions that I'm going to ask you, which we haven't rehearsed, obviously, and that's deliberate. So forgive me for that. So first thing that comes on in your mind.
Oh dear, right. Things. Try not to say something embarrassing.
So here we go.
Right, brilliant.
So firstly, morning person or night owl?
Morning, definitely.
Okay. Risk taker or planner?
Planner.
Okay. What's one book, show, or podcast that you'd recommend the most?
Book, it would be Return of the Native, Thomas Hardy. Huge Thomas Hardy fan. Okay. That's my favourite of his.
Cool. I'll try and put that in the link so people can check that out. And we sort of touched on this a bit, but I guess giving your younger self one piece of advice in 5 words, if you can, or less, what would that be?
Back yourself.
Love it.
Don't worry.
Yeah. There you go. You got 4. That's good. Back yourself and don't worry. Okay. And then I guess just finishing with, what's one thing that you're curious about at the moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
It's going to be fascinating. It's worry. I said don't worry. It's worrying in what it can do.
Yeah.
It's also potentially could be really incredible. So I think that is a topic that is going to keep coming up in the next 20 years.
Where do you, on that, because we talk about a lot, and a lot of procurement people talked around, is it going to replace, is it going to enhance?
Yeah.
Which camp do you sit in?
I'm in the enhance box, definitely. I think, transactional. Of course, absolutely. It'd be brilliant. Yeah. Wouldn't it be lovely? I'd love to be able to say something. Can I have a spend report with all these things in from various sources which don't match, please? Yeah. And can you work that out intelligently? That would be wonderful. It's definitely not arrived, and it will take years to come in on that kind of level, I would say.
Yeah.
But when it does, it should enhance you, make you go further, right? So that would be brilliant. What I don't think it's ever going to do is replace someone really understanding what the core competency of a supplier is, understanding how to optimize demand,
supply challenges,
really optimizing the specification of something that you're buying for stakeholders. It's never going to do that.
Yeah.
What it might do is be able to speed up, kind of high-level market searches and, make you understand your data better, faster. That would be great.
which I think ultimately in time, hopefully, would free up your buyers and procurement to
100%.
do other things.
Well,
more
to be doing the
strategic
thinking.
Yeah.
To be doing the thinking. You might say, well, AI is going to do the thinking. I'm going to go, well, I don't think it's going to do the thinking, actually. I think you still got to do that yourself.
Yeah.
But you could get to the right information faster.
Yeah. Procurement is a people profession, and it should remain that way, obviously with AI to support it. That's my views.
Absolutely. It's strategy, right? So it's about strategy, planning, execution. And you could argue, well, AI can do all that, but AI will largely repeat what it's seen before at this point anyway. I mean, yes, of course, in the future it might develop its own mind, but I would say I don't necessarily would want that. I think you still want to do the strategy planning. Yeah. Some of the execution it may be able to do.
Yeah, totally agree. And just to finish with, obviously you finished Direct Line, enjoying your consultancy work now. Yes. How's that going? How are you finding it?
Yeah, really interesting. So I've worked as a consultant a number of times. It's the one thing I do enjoy is the independence. So it's lovely having. It's great leading a big team. I've hugely enjoyed that. I also enjoy just worrying about my own.
I was going to say, being your own boss.
Being my own boss, worrying about myself. Yeah. And if I do a great job, the clients keep me on. If I don't do a great job, they let me go. It's very straightforward. So I don't have to worry about lots of internal processes. I need to worry about delivering for people. And I'm enjoying it. So that's great. Yeah.
Great. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to hear about your sort of career background, your learns, and what you're up to now, and wish you the best of success the rest of the year and beyond. And thanks again for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.
A big thanks again to our sponsor, Omnia. If you want to check out more about Omnia, please go to their website, www.omnia, that's omnea.co. Many thanks, and look out for the next episode coming to you soon.